Over the past several weeks, there has been a boycott effort against Facebook, where advertisers have piled on demanding that they police hate speech more. Well, Mark Zuckerberg has resisted this to a certain degree, but as the boycott's grown larger and larger, he's slowly given up more ground because apparently Mark Zuckerberg isn't smart enough to realize there's no line. You see, first they came and said, oh, look, you've got hate speech. Our advertisements shouldn't appear on these things. And so Mark Zuckerberg introduced some changes. One of those changes is that you can't criticize immigration anymore, or that you can't claim that anyone having to do anything to do with immigration or immigrants could result in a threat to your safety or your health or things like or the economy. I mean, it's a big portion of Donald Trump's campaign. Well, the boycott didn't stop. It got worse. So Mark Zuckerberg said, look, we're not going to change our policies because advertisers are threatening us. It's a small percentage of our revenue. Well, they kept threatening. They kept piling on. Hundreds got on board. I think like 750. Even though Facebook makes most of its money from small business advertising in local areas, they eventually passively caved. And Sheryl Sandberg said, we're going to do better to ban hate speech. The boycott has not stopped because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't understand it will never stop. He already banned a bunch of right-wing, personalities and Trump supporters. Did they stop then? No, and they won't. The only thing you can do is say, shut up. No. He tried a little bit, but you know what? He was scared of the negative PR and gave in. And now that you've given in again, they will keep pushing. There is no line. They want total subjugation. Well, Facebook's certainly being rewarded for it. The same day they announced that they were going to be policing hate speech to do better, which they already do, which is a nonsensical statement, their stock reached a record high at $247.65 per share. This is the opposite of get woke, go broke. It's kind of confusing because it is fair to say, to a certain degree, Zuckerberg said, pound sand to these companies after they finally pushed him too hard. Then Sheryl Sandberg came in, and it seems like they're finally just giving in. They're giving in and giving up, and their stock's being rewarded for it. But I got to imagine, if Facebook starts to ban more of its users and people already are going to go to other sites, well, then they're going to start losing money because the less users you have, the less valuable those advertisements are, or the less ability you have to actually place those advertisements. But perhaps Facebook's so big, it just doesn't matter. They could ban hundreds of thousands of people and say, what do we care? We got 2 billion users? I don't think we're in a good place right now. For those of us that believe in true liberalism, the true definition, meaning, freedom of speech, like classical liberalism, John Locke, etc., I think liberalism is losing. I think it's absolutely being crushed under authoritarian leftism. And the reason for this is that those who believe in liberty give ground to their ideological opponents, authoritarians, who will cheat to win. Like this boycott against Facebook. Facebook boycott leaders slam Zuckerberg for doing just about nothing to remove hate speech from July 8th, from today. Yet the other day, what did we see? This is from July 7th. Their stock was up, but Sheryl Sandberg issued a statement saying, okay, we're firmly against hate. We are going to do better to remove this hate. They come out the next day saying, no, not enough. Mark Zuckerberg is bending over backwards, spineless, unable to stop the hordes of authoritarian leftism and intersectionalism. This communist faith or ideology is taking over. And if Mark Zuckerberg continues to ban more opinions, as Twitter has already done, as YouTube has already done, maybe there will be some kind of marketplace competitive resurgence. The positive, the hopeful, the optimistic idea here is that, look, when you ban people, they don't just cease to exist. And now you have Parler, which is taking off with a massive user base. Couple million people, I think, not the biggest platform in the world, but at least you can still follow all of these people who have been banned, on other platforms. In the past, whenever someone's tried to create an alternative social media platform because of the censorship, they've been immediately attacked by the far left. This is the game they play. It is insidious, it is malicious, and they do not want you to have any freedoms or civil rights. So here's what happens. The people in media will slam Mark Zuckerberg and defend major international corporations who want Facebook to do what they say, ban more people, silence more people. If those people who get banned try to go to an alternative platform, what happens? The same media outlets will then write that they're far right, that they're Nazis or whatever, And then all of a sudden their advertisements get pulled. Their DNS hosting gets, their DNS service gets like jammed up or pulled. Their hosting service gets pulled. All of these really, or they get DDoS attacked. They don't want them to be able to communicate. They want to make sure that dissent is crushed. They do not believe in freedom of speech or freedoms for anyone. They'll claim that, and they do, that Parler is a bunch of far-right extremists when it's literally just like conservatives. That's it. It's mostly just like Trump supporters and conservatives. All of this says to me that I think they're winning. Look, you can argue, you can be hopeful and be optimistic. I think that's fine. But I'm going to be realistic. Right now, we are seeing Facebook losing out. The more they resist, the worse things get. And the more they give in, the better it is for them within reason. We recently saw this letter go around from Harper's. I haven't actually done a segment on it, so I want to talk about it. And it's kind of funny because, for those that aren't familiar, a letter was drafted saying that this illiberalism and cancel culture is a bad thing, and it must be, we have to resist this. And I think it was like 150 writers, journalists, academics, and artists, including J.K. Rowling, Noam Chomsky, and Margaret Atwood, signed the letter, arguing that stifled free speech is creating an intolerant climate within society. Immediately, people tried canceling those who signed the letter. J.K. Rowling is certainly no longer pulling her punches, and people stood defiant. While it is, you may say it is a hopeful thing, it is a positive thing that this letter was written with many left-wing and liberal voices, when we already have some people apologizing for having signed the letter in the first place. Now, I actually think that's a good thing. That they would apologize suggests there's a real reason for this letter, and it legitimizes the concerns here. If I write a letter saying we should be allowed to have a debate, and then you try and shut it down, and I have to apologize, I mean, I personally wouldn't, but someone else does, it just proves it. It proves there is a serious problem. In fact, some people have already contacted the employers of some of these people who have signed this. Well, you ain't doing nothing to J.K. Rowling. She's got FU money. Noam Chomsky is very old, so I don't think he's going to budge. And Noam Chomsky, there's a video going around. I retweeted this. It's him from like the 70s or something, maybe the 80s, I don't know, where he's basically saying, I will support free speech even for those whose people whose views I disagree with. And simply defending free speech doesn't mean you defend their views. And people were screaming at him. And he's like, no. He's like, no, I will legally defend someone's right to free speech if you're trying to silence them. But still, this seems to me like almost like a death rattle, the death throes. Freedom of speech, liberty, individualism is being crushed by major corporations and by, unfortunately, yes, Democrats, who are in agreement that people shouldn't have the right to speak up and that we should ban and censor people. When we hear from these Democrats talking about Facebook, for the most part, they're not talking about spying, though AOC has called out the spying from big tech, and I can respect that. They're typically talking about hate speech and how their opponents should not be allowed to communicate. And they are winning. I don't know what to tell you. You might get mad that I'm saying it, but I see it every day. The cliffs are eroding. They're banning more and more people. You may disagree with Stefan Molyneux. I don't know a lot about his views, to be honest. Don't really watch his YouTube content. And I've only ever met him passively, once. But they banned him. He had close to 1 million subscribers. How did he make it this far, having broken no rules? Well, I do know the media has lied about him a lot. Again, I can't speak for what his actual ideas are. I don't know. But I do know that following his banning now from YouTube and Twitter, there are people showing some of the things he said, clearly showing that many articles written about him are completely false. They've tried doing the same thing to me, albeit it's much more difficult for them, but they have absolutely tried to smear me in the worst possible way. But the best they could muster is that I'm right wing or something, which is strange because I'm not. I'm a liberal, traditional liberal. I actually took this test from the Hidden Tribes More in Common Data, and yep, traditional liberal. The only problem is these people who are in control and are dictating these stories, this cancel culture, they are more powerful because they cheat and because they threaten people. Most liberals aren't politically active. This is according to the More in Common Data, More in Common, the Hidden Tribes thing. I love citing this, and they're not really engaged. So there are some people who are engaged, people like me. We call these people the politically homeless. They're obviously liberals, left-leaning individuals who don't agree with the authoritarianism and are speaking up, but are getting crushed because of it, getting lied about, getting smeared. I mean, they go after the intellectual dark web type individuals all the time. They've tried to shut them down, but it's really hard when the people are actually fairly liberal. But this is where we end up. As long as these people are willing to cheat and no one else is willing to stand up out of fear, then they will continue to win. Speech will be stifled. And then I can say it really does seem like they are winning on this front. It's funny because at the beginning of COVID, beginning of this year, it seemed like they had been crushed entirely. Realism was setting in with a real conflict. All of a sudden, no one cared about these weird issues anymore. But then, end of May, they came back with a vengeance, and now they're just pushing even harder than before. So I don't know. I don't know how we stop it. I don't know how we succeed from here. But you basically only have conservatives that are fighting back. And that's probably why they would say someone like me is conservative, or that, Dave Rubin, for instance. It's because liberals are not engaged, not speaking up. And so you have well-intentioned social liberals who are saying things like, I agree, Black Lives Matter. But then you have policy dictated by the most activist, the furthest left, the most extreme, and they dictate policy. Let me read you this story. Let me read and show you what's going on with this letter. They tried, but to me, this is a death throw, right? It's a desperate gasp for air from a drowning man. We who believe in true freedom, liberty, like on the libertarian spectrum, the true definition of liberalism, and I don't mean the colloquial sense. I mean like freedom. Okay, I had to clarify that because the definitions have been muddied up. They say that, I'll put it this way. The left is not liberal. You can be conservative and be in favor of liberalism. And that's where I think what the left has done is so insidious. I see conservatives saying liberalism is a disorder or something. And that's not true. This country, America, was founded upon the ideals of liberalism, the consent of the governed, freedom of speech, like our founding, our Bill of Rights and all that. But the word has been corrupted and tainted by leftism. And now people don't even know what it means. But this is our country, our ideals, our freedom. We are drowning. And this letter was a desperate gasp for oxygen. And I'm sorry, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't. These people, many of them, they fed the beast for a long time, including J.K. Rowling. And so my respect to her for finally speaking up, but perhaps too little too late. Too little too late. Of course, I think it's fair to point out, maybe, the tides can still be turned. Just because freedom and free expression has been routed by our opponents, the authoritarian left, doesn't mean we can't spark a comeback and, with a strategic retreat or war cry, charge forward, maybe we can take back some of this ground. But I'm not convinced. I'm not at all. Even if Donald Trump wins, even if the Republicans control the House and the Senate and they pass some measure that curtails, Section 230 guaranteeing legally protected speech, I'm not entirely convinced. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe that's the last-ditch effort. I'm not a fan of most of a lot of the right-wing cultural policies. The easiest way to explain the divide between, the freedom-loving faction, how we don't agree, is Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. And I cited this, in the past couple of segments. They clearly don't agree on many issues, even the way each other lives. Or, for the most part, Dave being a gay married man and Ben Shapiro being an Orthodox Jew, they have serious disagreements. But they agree on freedom. And so that's how you can see someone like me doesn't agree with these policies, but all of us are united in defending the rights to freedom and free expression. And perhaps because of that, the only hope we have is that Republicans get in and finally do something. Here's the problem. I don't think they will. They had 2 years from 2016 to 2018 where they controlled everything. Did they do anything? No. Were we talking about censorship and our rights being curtailed? Yes. Did they care? No, they didn't. So why should I believe they'll do anything now? Take a look at what's going on with New Jersey's 2nd District. Jeff Van Drew won. Maybe you've seen the news. This is not, in my opinion, good news. I mean, it is to an extent. Jeff Van Drew is a conservative Democrat. He is the furthest left Republican as far as I can tell as of right now, because he ran as a Democrat. He won as a Democrat. What's happened now in South Jersey is that the Republican running is, for all intents and purposes, a Democrat. He ran as a Democrat, he won as a Democrat, and then he just changed the symbol from a D to an R, which means everything is being pulled to the left. If the Republican now in New Jersey is a moderate right-leaning conservative Democrat, further left, he's got a 100% Planned Parenthood rating. Now, I'm not saying this to rag on the Republicans because the Republicans do have more left-leaning members for sure. What I'm seeing is that everything is being pulled further and further left and authoritarian left. And now I'll tell you something that may worry you. In New Jersey's 2nd, Jeff Van Drew did win. So that's good. Trump endorsed him. And that is good in my opinion. The Republicans are becoming more moderate. I can respect that. And that makes it easier for me, especially, to consider supporting Republicans, especially if they will defend free speech and free inquiry. But when you look at what's going on with Van Drew and in the second, when you look at the vote count, it's worrying. The Democrats mustered 37,000 votes, I believe. I believe it was 37,000 votes, and the Republicans mustered 27,000. Now, it could be because everybody knew Van Drew was going to win, and there were only 2 people running. On the Democrat side, they pulled in 37,000 primary votes, and they had like 6 people running, I believe. Maybe that's why they got more votes, because there were some people who really cared about those individuals, and, Van Drew still mustered more votes individually than any other Democrat. But if you were to take those hard numbers and translate that to a general run, it seems like Jeff Van Drew will not win re-election. New Jersey's 2nd will remain. I mean, it's red now because he changed parties, but he got elected as a Democrat in 2018. And it's likely the Democrat will win in New Jersey's 2nd unless every single person who's not a registered Republican gets out and goes and votes Republican. Here's what's going to happen. The Republicans have been fairly static in their ideology, how conservative they are relative to the rest of the population. That's someone sent me this chart. Actually, a progressive sent me this chart. It was interesting. If the Republicans win and they agree to immediately pass Section 230 reform, which would, as according to DOJ guidelines released by Bill Barr, would state the only way Facebook, Twitter, and these other platforms will maintain their legal protections, meaning they can't be sued for libel, is if they protect legal speech. Right now, Section 230, for those that aren't familiar, says that the gist of it is if I post something on YouTube, you can't sue YouTube for what I said. The argument is that, back in the day, if YouTube made a website, whatever appears on that website was published by YouTube. So actually, it was a newspaper that had a forum. And the newspaper argued, we don't control the comment section. That's just what people want to post. And so Section 230 was crafted specifically to say, we want people engaging online, but you can't if there's liability issues. So how about this? No one can sue you if, it's user-generated content, which is separate from what you publish. They say an online service is protected from their speech, blah, blah, blah. But then they said, well, hold on. What if we have to remove stuff? Like, what if someone posts something really nasty? We got to take it down. We don't want them to think we're a publisher if we're choosing what gets removed. So Section 230 specifically said that objectionable, lewd, illegal content could be removed. Under the word objectionable, they can remove literally anything because it's an opinion. Now they ban political opinions they don't like, and people who believe in free speech are being shut out. I'm not even talking about conservatives. The left will use the insidious tactics of lying about what I believe and what other people believe in an effort to get us shut down and get you shut down. They'll say they're conspiracy theorists, they're a bigot, they're far right, whatever. It's more difficult to do to the intellectual dark web types who are fairly liberal, but conservatives are fair pickings. They can easily just knock them out because a conservative might criticize immigration. And then they slowly erode the cliffs and ever increase the rules. Oh, now you can't say anything bad about immigration. Then they ban more people. It's clearly not objectionable, but they have that leeway. The Republicans would have to win the House and the Senate and the presidency. They would have to immediately draft Section 230 reform under the DOJ guidelines, which would state that they can only remove content if it's illegal in good faith. There's the DOJ guidelines are still not perfect, but what we would essentially see then is that you could post all of the worst opinions in the world on Facebook, and so long as it is a legal opinion, they cannot remove it. Otherwise, they would then lose their liability protection and could be sued. These companies would immediately then say, we will unban, unblock, and people are allowed to say what they want. Well, they'll probably still keep the people who are banned, but that means it stops here. And that means people can sign up. They can say what they want to say for better or for worse. And that will restore balance to the political conversation. Now, of course, they argue that the left won't want to be on the platform. They'll threaten a boycott. They'll leave unless they do something. That's what they've been doing. The left has repeatedly threatened boycotts, like people like Will Wheaton. You know, the guy from Star Trek who played Wesley Crusher? He once threatened to quit Twitter unless they banned Alex Jones. Twitter refused to do it, so Wil Wheaton quit and went to a far-left platform called Mastodon. Mastodon isn't necessarily far-left, but everyone there is far-left. Well, they eventually did ban Alex Jones. Wil Wheaton deleted his account. He's like, I'm going to quit unless you do what I say. If you took away Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube's ability to actually ban people, they would be immune from far-left boycott campaigns. That's the point. I go back to the initial story where Facebook is saying, fine, we'll do what you say. Imagine this. Advertisers show up to Facebook and say, we demand that you ban hate speech. And Mark Zuckerberg need only say, that's illegal. And they go, oh, yeah, sorry. If you want the ad space, you can buy it, but we literally can't do what you ask. Sorry. The way I see it is this. Let's say you buy a billboard. You're a regular advertiser. You buy a billboard. You buy billboard space, sorry. And you put up your big old ad for your crunchy cheese flavored snack. And then all of a sudden, next to this billboard, a guy shows up holding a gigantic sign with some objectionable material on it. Are you then going to go to the city and say, I demand you remove that man because it appears in photos with my ad, it's making me look bad? They're going to be like, free speech. Why can't we have the same thing on the internet? If someone posts something dumb, I'm not stupid enough to think Coca-Cola's endorsing that dumb thing. So maybe it's our last chance. Because if this does not happen, 230 reform does not happen, I will be banned. You will be banned. Many of you probably have already been banned several times from different platforms. And Facebook will keep bending over to the far left. They will keep losing. They will keep ceding ground, and we will lose. It's the last-ditch effort. If it's true that, people hate Trump and the Republicans and Biden's going to win, maybe that's the end. Republicans were too stupid to stop this before it got too bad. And now, because of the censorship, some of his highest profile supporters have been purged from mainstream platforms, and they're not part of this conversation anymore. That's a huge advantage to Joe Biden. You're not getting a lot of those arguments that would help Trump win. I'm not saying Trump is the best guy in the world, but I am saying we are facing an illiberal horde that is destroying our freedoms and tearing down statues. And our last chance is now. We'll see what happens. Now, I'll wrap it up with this. For obvious reasons, people are going to be commenting, saying like, well, then are you going to vote for the Republicans, Tim? Are you going to vote? We will see. But of course, I said yesterday, and I said it the day before and a week before, I am absolutely leaning in the direction. I wouldn't be saying these things otherwise. And I did say yesterday, if the election was held right now and I had to make a choice, I would not be voting Democrat. I'd probably vote for the Republicans. However, the Republicans have been so incredibly ineffective, I've become rather pessimistic on any hope for us stopping this trend and pushing back on what's happening. But I will give props to Trump because he's going to build that garden of heroes. So that is rejecting the destruction of these statues, and he'll at least do what he can to replace, the statues that were destroyed. We'll see how things play out. We have 4 months to do something that will protect our speech rights. Keep in mind, they could still, even if we do 230 reform, the Democrats could win 2 years later and then destroy that reform. And then we're in trouble. And we're in trouble now. Most Americans don't realize how bad it is. And maybe that's why we will lose. I don't mean conservatives. I mean people who believe in the right to free speech, free expression, and liberty. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at timcast.net at 4 p.m., and I will see you all then.